Okay, so the topic today that we're going to speak about is a topic that I spoke once before, and we discussed it at length. And I think it's important to discuss these topics because it gives us a perspective in our history, and it gives us an idea of how our Hachamim and how the Torah was concerned about the protection of women's rights throughout the generation. And when I told people originally, about the name of the subject, so I said women's rights in Morocco. They said, what women's rights? There existed any women's rights? And I feel so bad when people say that because they don't have an idea how opposite of the truth it is, and how really, if one is going to see today, that the opposite is true. And there is so many examples how not only in Morocco was there a tremendous amount of protection for the ladies, but au contraire, on the contrary, they were the forerunners and the innovators in making sure that women's rights got protected. And the reason why I think it's important to speak about this is because it will give us examples for our communities how to make protections. And if we see in those days how they made protections and guidelines and takanot, as we're going to see, and different enactments, we're going to see how all the more so nowadays, how we have to learn from our avotinu akidushim. So first, we're going to start off all the way in the back from already the year 1492. The year 1492 was a very important year. It was the Gerush Farad. It was when the Jews were expelled. And when the Jews were expelled, it was a very traumatic event. You could imagine people had to leave all of their homes, all of their possessions, and they were in tremendous amount of sakana, of danger. They were in tremendous amounts of dangers. Around 50,000 Jews, approximately, came to Morocco from Spain. Around 50,000 Jews. And the Barbanel, he writes a different amount. He says 20,000. We're going to see how that number came about. What happened is that they mostly came to the capital, which was Fez, and the king greeted them, and they were very happy to have them in Fez, because they brought with them a lot of intellect and a lot of skill, and there would have been a growth for the economy in Morocco. So they were very happy to have them. But then you could imagine a lot of people, they left, and there was an overcrowding, and there happened right after that in the city of Fez, in the year 1492, there was a famine that broke out, hunger, and then a fire, which 20,000 Jews died. 20,000 Jews died in Fez. So you have the community was devastated. So I'm just going to give you a background because we're going to see certain takanot that came about. You could imagine that there was many agunot. Aguna means a lady who doesn't know what happened to her husband. There were women who were raped in Saleh and in other places because they were taken advantage. They were brought from Spain. Some of them didn't know if their husbands left behind. They didn't want to leave. So some of them were Maranos, and they didn't know where they were. So a lot of women were left without their husbands. A lot of women were left taken advantage of, and a lot of women, their husbands died in this plague. So it was a very depressing moment in Jewish history at that time. So the Hachamim of Fez got together, and they said, we have to start making takanot to help these women. There was two main problems going on. Number one was that people would grab ladies that they thought are single, and they would marry them, and they would force them to marry them. They would say, here, marry me in front of two witnesses. And that was a big problem because we didn't know now how to trace who was legitimate, who wasn't legitimate. It was called Kiddushei Hatifa. It was called grabbing women. So the Chachamim made a takana at that time, a very original takana, that you were only allowed to marry in front of 10 people. In other words, it had to be a public event. It couldn't be a private event. It had to be a public event. That there would be a marriage in front of 10 people, and it would be recorded, and that a Rav was there so that we could record it. And not only that, if one tries to marry a lady in private without 10 people there, the Hachamim had the power to say it's not a valid marriage, and she's not married, this lady. This prevented a lot of problems of a woman getting stuck in a marriage where a person was just trying to take advantage of her. That was one takana that they did. A second takana is that they forced a husband who was sick, very sick on his deathbed, because remember, there was a big plague, there was a famine, and a lot of people started dying by plague. So what happened? If this husband died, and they didn't have children, there's a halacha called yibum. Yibum means that she has to first marry his brother. If he doesn't want to marry her, he gives her chalisa. He gives her chalisa. He frees her. There's a whole process of the shoot. Now, what happens if you can't find this brother? This lady's an aguna, because she's not free to marry somebody else until her husband, who's deceased, brother, does chalisa. And a lot of these brothers were not in Morocco. They were back in Spain. So you had a big problem over here. You had a big problem that these women, if their husbands died, they would remain an aguna, stuck for life. Some of them were young. They didn't have children yet, because if they had children, it was not a problem. So we're talking about a woman who could have been left in a very, very difficult situation.
And if they waited 10 years,
No. That had nothing to do with 10 years or not. For the rest of her life, she would have been stuck until they find that brother. It's a very big issue. They have that issue till today, that one brother refuses to give to free the lady. It's a big problem.
so how about if the brother at the time, the brother-in-law, for him to do studies, if he wanted to marry the halacha or whatever it was, for one night, it has to be in the shop, and then there's no. And she said, there's no way I'm going to do this.
And she had to pay him off?
And they went to Rabbi.
That's unbelievable. You see that? It's very difficult. So the Chachamim didn't stay behind and say, okay, whatever happens, happens. They took proactive cases, they took proactive measures in order to protect the ladies then. So that was an amazing already step that wasn't so common in those days. In the year 1492 already, they took a common step to protect. Yeah? Okay. So what did they do? They forced the husband. A lot of times he didn't want to give a get to his wife. Why? Because he's going to have to pay her off. Right? Even if he's deathly ill. He doesn't want to take his hands to give it. He would rather give the money to others. He doesn't want to give it to his wife. They forced him. They said, no, you have to give a get, because otherwise you're going to leave your wife in a dangerous situation. So that was the year 1492, where there is a clear indication how the Hachamim of Castilla, in those days, already took initiative to protect the ladies in that time, to make sure that there would not be any vulnerable situation that they would be left in. Yes? Oh, that I never heard. Oh, no. In Arabic they say it's Baba Maitin. Okay. The second takana, and this is a takana that's very important to know. This is the second example, how the Hachamim were concerned about a woman's well-being, which was the following. And this is till today. We're going to see how their wisdom applied, and till today we see this. You know that a husband, when he marries his wife, he's obligated to give her certain guarantees. That in case he dies, or in case he divorces her, she will get a certain compensation that she'll be able to live properly. It's called a ketubah. That's what a ketubah is. It's not some fancy figula. It's a document of protection that a woman gets that she will be protected. Now, how much is the ketubah? 200 zuz. 200 zuz, 200 coins, which was enough in those days to help her survive for a year or 2 years. But the issue was that it started becoming more and more difficult for women to be able to live on the ketubah. So the Hachamim, first of a place called in the language of the Shulchan Aruch, Tolitulia, which more commonly is known as Toledo. So it's in the city of Toledo already in the early 1400s, before the expulsion of Spain. They made certain takanot, certain enactments, to make sure that a woman is going to get not only 200 zuz, but she would get up to half of whatever the husband had. She would get up to half. Now, the Hachamim of Castilla modified this. The Hachamim of Castilla modified this, and they made it that anybody who gets married in their community of Castilla will be able to have a ketubah that she has at least half. She has half, which is a tremendous amount, which was really protected her very well, and the husband would think twice before just letting her go, and she also would be protected. And there was many, many positive reasons for this takana, and this was the ketubah, we call it, of the Megurashim ni Castilla, those who were expelled from Castilla. So when you hear under the chuppah nowadays, the ketubah that mostly we use in the Moroccan communities, for sure over here in Toronto, is that Ba'akol al-pi minhag utnai ha-megurashim ni Castilla. That means this. That means that a woman would be protected up to half, which is what basically the law is nowadays by the secular law as well.
And the rabbi said, how much? The symbol, $1 for symbol.
No. Listen, but it's an interesting. I don't know what. I don't know who what. Yeah, it's not for symbol. It's definitely not for symbol. A ketubah is a real document. As a matter of fact, I have upstairs a book that Baruch Hashem, Mr. Oziel, Hashem give him refuah shlema, he printed for me, 400 pages of ketubot. I would show them to you, and inside you'll see real ketubot up in the 1940s, 1950s, that they were notarized by the notary there, and with the official stamp of Morocco, because this is a legal document that the women have to collect money, and there was many questions on it. Now, in Marrakesh, they didn't accept this takana megurashim. They had something called ketuvah kadat, which is called ketuvah like the Torah, which is ketuvah katoshavim, which meant that they would get whatever's written in the ketubah, but it wasn't from the megurashim. But this was a tremendous takana, up until the point that in the early 1900s, there started to become a problem. Because what happens if the husband, he has a previous marriage, he has 5 kids. Yeah? He has 5 kids, 5 boys, let's say, 5 girls. And then he marries a lady. And after a month, he dies. So this lady is going to take half of this wealth, and the boys are going to split the other half by 5. That was starting to get to be a little bit of a problem. So the Hachamim got together in the year Tavshin Tet. Tavshin Tet is around 60 years ago. They got together and they made something called the Takanat HaBechira. Rabbi Shaul ibn Dinan, who was the chief rabbi in Morocco in the 1950s rather, he made a takana. They made this called Takanat HaBechira, but they modified the ketubah a little bit, and they said instead of a woman getting half, if there's going to be, let's say, 5 boys and her, so everybody's going to split equal portions. Just to modify, because it was starting to become more and more excessive. But once again, it's an example that the Hachamim were concerned that the woman would have enough to live by, and they protected her in that type of way. And you know that if these takanot were adopted nowadays, people would take the ketubah much more seriously. Instead of examples like Mrs. Biton told us that they wrote it symbolic or whatever else, if they knew how the proper system works, they would have a tremendous amount of respect. How already before all of the secular laws thought about exactly how to split things up, we made sure to protect the ladies' rights. Third example. So far we spoke about the takanot of 1492. Then we spoke about the ketubah. And this is the third case, which is a much more sensitive topic, of domestic abuse. And we have to speak about this. Now, let me tell you one thing. First of all, people say that, but the Sfaradim, there was more cases of domestic abuse. I want to say the following: that by the Goyim, throughout history, for sure by the years 1400 up until late 1900, domestic abuse was very, very accepted. Not common, but accepted. And I'm going to read to you from a newspaper. Let me tell you, in a newspaper in England, you would think that England, maybe they were a little bit more advanced yet. The law law of women was that a man may beat a woman with a stick or rod as thick as his middle finger, and as long as his forearm. So it's not allowed to be a big stick. It has to be there was laws for could you imagine this? For the stick like this. In 1864, Raymond Hayes, a medical doctor, after thrashing his wife with a horsewhip, told her that legally he could beat her with not anything thicker than his thumb. Do you understand what's going on here? In 1853, Earl Granville mentioned the horrible cases of assault which constantly met the public eye in the columns of morning journals because he believed they were perfectly aware of how numerous were the cases of great cruelty, wholly wanted and unprovoked. Over and over you see these cases, flagrant examples of domestic abuse that was totally accepted according to the secular law. Now listen to this. In the Sefer Bet Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, quotes, Siman Kuf Nun Daled, Even HaEzer, that's Even HaEzer 154. He quotes that that's a little bit shocking, but he says that a husband who hits his wife, you're allowed to put him in excommunication, you're allowed to put him in cherem, you're allowed to embarrass him, take away all of his rights as a member, and if he continues, you're allowed to chop off his arm. That was, no, I want you to appreciate it. This was in the 1500s, where all the Goyim held it was perfectly acceptable. There was nothing wrong. The Jews from the beginning of time, who wrote something like this, shows that not only did we have protection of women's rights, we were the first ones protections of rights. And the chutzpah of people nowadays to say, oh, Torah, Judaism, the Torah and the rabbis, they discriminate against women. They don't know anything what they're talking about in history. Quite the opposite is true. We were the first one, and where it wasn't popular, we were the first ones to protect women's rights. I want to read to you a case of Rabbi Chaim David Serero. I mentioned his name before. He was a dayan in Morocco in the 1940s. He was a dayan in the city of Mogador in 1940, 41, and then from Marrakesh to Mogador. And this is a case from the Betin of Mogador of 1942, not so long ago. Discusses a lady. Her name is Rachel. This is not published. I have his writings. There's a Shem. I hope to publish them very soon, in a year or something. This is his writings. He writes like this: Rachel is the wife of Shimon Halevi. His name, There's a lot of Shimon HaLevi, so don't try to say, oh, that's my grandfather's thing. I don't know. She's complaining about her husband who visits not nice houses, and he gambles, and he does improper things until he comes at night. And when he comes at night, he's all drunk, and he hits his wife, makot resach, deadly hit. And she wants to know, what's the case? Says Rabbi Chaim David Sariro, and this was the Bedin in Mogador in 1942. This lady, we see that she has bruises, all types of colors of bruises, he says. And therefore we are posek, according to what is written in the Bet Yosef, that we are going to we are going to give his din. We're going to hand him over to the police, which was the authorities in those days, and we are going to seriously punish him according to the punishment that he deserves. And that's how they took care of the cases. In other words, it was a common lo aleinu. We hope that it wasn't so common. But if the Jews had a problem with domestic abuse, they learned it from the Goyim, unfortunately. But the Torah was the opposite, protecting the whole way through. From the 1500s, once again, when it wasn't so popular till today. So that I think is a tough example, but it's a real example of how we have cases, how the women's rights in Morocco portrayed itself, and what we could learn from it, obviously, nowadays. That zero tolerance, such as zero tolerance. Case number 4, the Takanot of the 1950s. This was very interesting. I think we many of you know, maybe if you had by my shiur once, I gave a shiur about this, but the Hachamim in Morocco got together not so long ago, less than 70 years ago, 60, 65 years ago. They got together between the year 1949 to 1956. Every year they would get together in Casablanca, I believe, that they would, all the Rabbanim of the different areas, from the north, from the south, and they would discuss what enactments, what takanot could they do to protect different things that need to be protected. And one of the things they felt were certain issues, women's issues of the time, that they felt important to protect. So the only Rav who's still alive nowadays, who was at those takanot, his name is Rabbi Yehoshua Maman. He's a Rav from Sofro, and he was a Dayan in Rabat, I believe. Then he later moved to Beersheba, and now he lives in Rehov Rashi, I believe, in the middle of Yerushalayim, right next to the Shket HaGiyus of Tzahal. I used to go to his house very often. I just called last week. I sent an email to his son, send a letter to him. He's older, Rabbi Yeshua Maman. And when he was very young, you could imagine he was a very young Dayan, probably the youngest Dayan there, he proposed the takana that was accepted. What was this takana? That, according to halacha, a son inherits, but a daughter doesn't inherit. Why?
Discrimination.
No. This is the Torah. The Torah doesn't discriminate. Why does a son inherit, not a daughter inherit? Because it was expected, what about a single girl? It was expected, Rabbi Shalom Nisas writes, because it was expected that the boy, he takes care of his sister. He becomes the father in charge, and he takes care of his sister. That's the logic, and that's how it was in society for many, many, many years. Society changed. The Torah doesn't change. The Torah is eternal and perfect. The society changed, and people became more irresponsible. And not all the time brothers would take care of their sisters the way that they should. So Rabbi Yeshua Maman proposed that daughters should also get a certain amount of inheritance. Now, you can't change the law of the Torah. If the Torah says that a girl shouldn't inherit, you can't say, well, the Torah is this. We don't change it. We change laws. But what a person could do is that he could give a gift to his daughter before he dies, or the Bedin makes the takana. It's called, in America, Canada and America, we call it, a person makes a halachic will. You know that a person can't just make a will by a lawyer without making halachic nowadays, because it's not legally binding. A person is not able to bequeath something to his children once he's dead. So there's something called a halachic will, which is basically, he writes that according to the Torah, a second before he dies, he is giving this much to this son, this much to this daughter, and that way he avoids any machloket. That's the best thing possible. Otherwise, the son inherits and the daughter doesn't inherit. So if a person wants to make sure that all of his children have equal, he has to make a will that's halachically binding. And many religious lawyers have this text. It's a very simple text. And basically the idea is a minute before a person dies, he bequeaths that's when he bequeaths his inheritance. Because otherwise, once he's not in this world, he doesn't have the power to bequeath. So in Morocco, they did it a different system. They made it a takana. Once you made it a takana, the beddin basically takes hold of your money, and they say, this is your daughter is also going to get. So they don't really have a choice. Over here in America, a person has a choice to really get out of it if you want. In Morocco, a person didn't have a choice. He was in the community there. A daughter inherited like a son. And all the Rabbanim accepted this takana of Rav Yeshua. That's a very interesting thing. That, once again, according to what they saw, a protection of the daughter's rights, they made takanot in according to that. Another takana, in 1947 this was done, was of Rabbi Shaul ibn Dinan, was, see, I have the takana over here in French, from a book called, this was the notes, the minutes of the meetings there, Droit de la jeune fille à la succession. And they... Yeah. Yeah, but that they didn't have a brother. They didn't have a brother, right? So that's why they got. Right. It's interesting. Yeah. That's true. Now there was another takana in Morocco that, according to halacha, a husband is able to give a get to his wife, and he's able even to force his wife to accept a get. A lot of men took advantage of the situation, and they forced the get onto their wife, even though their wife didn't agree to the get. There was a special takana in 1947. Rabbi Shaul ibn Dinan said that if you see clearly that they're taking advantage of the situation, they're not allowed. That was in 1947, a takana. A similar takana, which till 1980, there was questions about this. Believe it or not, I know Dayanim that were in Morocco till very recently. They had to deal with such cases, which was, this takana was, let me tell you the exact date over here, in the year 1950. In the year 1950, it was the takana of the chashuka. The chashuka means a person's quote-unquote girlfriend. He would convince a young girl, even if she's not married, to be intimate with him. And, even nowadays, but in 1950 or 1940, once the girl has found out that she was playing around, not many people didn't want to marry her. She'd be left, and so she was taken advantage of by this man, and she's also to blame. We're not saying she's not to blame, but she's taking advantage. So there was a takana made that a person takes advantage of a girl before she is married. He has to marry her, or he has to pay her a large fine. Third option, jail.
Oh, wow.
Third option, jail. And I have to tell you, till the 1980s, I saw cases of Dayanim discussing this, what to do. Could imagine if there was this takana in Canada nowadays, how much better for our community it would be. But this was the foresight of the Chachamim in those days, that they took positive measures. They didn't say, well, you know what, let's just sit and relax and let's sit on our laurels and not do anything about the situations. They took proactive steps to protect the aguna, to protect the woman who's an almana, who's a widow, to protect a young girl, whether it's monetary or whether it is it's substantial other issues that she would have challenges in getting married. And they realized that according to the times, that's how that's how they worked it out. And so that's why I felt this topic is very important to discuss, to dispel any thoughts in our mind that we think that the Chachamim of the Torah did it because we hear nowadays, protect the Aguna, the rabbis should come and do more for the Aguna. Throughout the generations, that's all the Chachamim were trying to do, finding solutions. We're not going to change the Torah, and we're not going to alter what the kavanah of the Torah is. But to say that the Chachamim were not sensitive to the situation, that's just ignorance. That's just ignorance. That's just not knowing history properly. So that's basically our subject. Let me just turn the thing.